Hey everyone, welcome to the Industry Show. I'm your host, Nitin Bajaj, and joining me today is Ravi Sreedharan. Ravi, welcome on the show. Finally. So let's start with who is Ravi? Ravi, this is something I've really, having known you for several years now, you're extremely down to earth. You have worked hard to get to a place where you're able to make the choices that you have made. And the amazing choice you've made is to give back to the community. And when you say you hit the lottery, a lot of hard work went into it and you made good on everything that has come your way and what you have worked for. I would love for you to share about ISDM, the organization that you co-founded, and tell us a little more about the mission, the vision, and more importantly, why did you end up starting ISDM? Sure. Mhm. Sure. And I absolutely love the mission and also the vision. And you have a state of the art facility, and that I've had an opportunity to come visit. Tell us more about as things stand today. ISDM has been in existence for a few years. You've had a few students or now alums that are out in the sector and helping the country and the larger community. Tell us the size and scale of the operations, and more importantly, the impact that ISDM has done created in just a very few short years.
Yeah, no, Nitin, it's obviously we're coming up to our eighth foundation year. So we've
Mhm.
graduated six batches of our postgraduate program. We've done a lot of knowledge work. We've set up three centers of excellence on data sciences for social impact, innovative finance for social impact, on philanthropy for inclusive development. These are all management questions, if you understand. We've also set up like an innovation hub where we're trying to figure out how can management be applied in very small rural organizations in the country, four or five people with 10 lakh, 20 lakh rupee budgets. Management doesn't reach there, but the backbone of civil society is there. So how does management reach there? So that's an innovation lab. We've started building capacity of the organizations in the country. So working with leadership teams of large organizations like America India Foundation, DCM Sriram Foundation, like Plan International, and so on and so forth. We've also trying to put together an e-school of development management where we can give wide access and over time, hopefully in languages, because social workers are in all sorts of languages. So we've graduated six batches. We graduate about one class each, roughly about 60, 70 students. So we have in north of about 400 odd students, and they are all over the country. They come from all over the country, and every batch has had students from at least 20 states, and they go all over the country. So they're in, check writing organizations to grassroots organizations. It's like the MBA, right? The MBA doesn't prepare you for a sector. It's like that. I prepare management graduates for the social sector, and then they can go into education, they can go into livelihood, they can go into many other areas and different functions. They could be in behavior change, they could be in fundraising, they could be in program management, and so on and so forth. But the biggest change, in my opinion, that we have achieved, Nitin, is really not in these numbers, which itself is impressive, is changing the narrative in the country. When we started, people said, why are you putting development and management in the same sentence? Management are those bad guys. Please keep them far away. And I try to explain that this management is a verb, not the noun that you're imagining. You need management to do whatever you're doing. You're organizing a wedding, you need management. You know what I mean? So it was that idea. And today, there are actually people using that language very conveniently. And there are also other institutions that have got inspired to start some work and labeling it as development management. And that's our holy grail. It's not about the institution, it's about mainstreaming the idea of development management. Then institutions will take off, programs will take off, youngsters will go study, people will do research and scholarship. And that's the challenge when you're building a category, right? And for me, that is the measure of success, that the narrative is building, and that's going to drive a huge change. I say this, right? We spend about 100,000 crores of rupees every year of private philanthropy. Even a 1% improvement in the effectiveness is worth 1,000 crores. And our institution is run at about 20, 25 crores. So the ROI is humongous.
I love two things about that. One is, as you said, just even a fraction of that huge number is pretty significant. But then, as you percolate through the systems and you shift those mindsets, you will see even more exponential gains over the years. And that's the beauty of starting something in a green field, essentially. There was nothing
Absolutely.
like this that existed in India. And given India's own journey and growth and where it's at now and it will be over the next 20, 25 years, I think you've hit the nail on the head with institutionalizing ISDM at the right time, at the right place, with the right people. Several people on your team are as amazing, maybe if not as
Okay.
cool as you.
Yeah.
But so kudos to you for
No,
bringing all of this together and making this significant change in the community for generations to come.
there's one
Yeah.
interesting statistic I want to share with you. Today, the largest NGO in this country reaches about 38 million people. That's like a drop in the ocean in a country like
Mhm.
ours, where, almost a billion plus people can't afford their calorific needs in this country. I'm imagining that by 2047, which is 100 years of Indian independence, if development management does take roots, it will do to the social sector what the MBAs did to the world of business, which is be able to do things at large scale and make the difference. I expect at least 100 NGOs with 100 crores budget and reaching 100 million people. That's when this country is going to change completely. So that's the like
That's
my
massive.
headline goal. Yeah.
That's massive. And knowing you and knowing the people you mess around with, it's happening way before that 100-year mark. So
No,
here to
it's
root for you and for the entire team.
no, thanks, Nitin. It's yeah.
Ravi, as we talk about these numbers and we look at what's to come at us in the next few years, what's the one big challenge you're facing?
One thing that I realized as in this journey is you need to build iconic institutions. It's imagine a Harvard Business School or a Harvard Kennedy School, right? So we need to build an iconic institution with students from all over the world, faculty from all over the world, great ideas, great knowledge being created, recreated, a fountainhead of knowledge for the space. People are looking up. That takes time. And in many ways, we are in a race against time. And that's the biggest challenge because today, with every passing year, another 20, 25 million people are coming out of the school with pathetic education, or another 200 million are being born into households, which are living without being able to afford the basic requirements for a dignified, healthy life. That hurts. I know this is going to take time, but I want to do this in a hurry. So the biggest challenge is to figure out how do you do this rapidly. The good news is that today in the world we live, thanks to the convergence of technology, communication, geographies, etc., I think we can do it. And as you can see, I'm a very optimistic person. So I'm of the belief that if a Harvard Business School has been around for 125 years, we don't have that luxury. We have to build that sort of an institution in 20 years. And that's the biggest challenge. And that requires many people to come together. And funding is a huge issue when you build institutions. And people like me have come with a lot of passion, with a lot of execution ability, with a lot of ideas, but not with large bank balances because I gave up my corporate career with just about enough to live till 75 years or something like that. So that combination of bringing people, bringing technology, bringing those networks and partnership, that's the key. And I use this phrase at ISDM that you don't build a new domain with some 80 people sitting in a however
Mhm.
fancy institution. It is going to happen through collective wisdom. So this idea of collective wisdom is the second challenge, if you ask me. And the third is funding. Funding, I know, is an easier problem to solve. How do you do this fast? How do you build those networks and collaborations and collective wisdom and money?
And in many ways, those challenges also are butting against opportunities that we have. One being the significant impact at scale that can happen and transform generations. So, what's that most exciting opportunity you're looking at? Looking at. Mhm.
India just produces the most amazing intellectual capital that you can imagine, and they're all over the world. And everybody is willing to, in some ways, give up part of that capital that they have. So the opportunity is many ways India. And the last thing I say is that I is not an India story. I is a global South story because the way you lead and manage organizations in the social sector in a developing country is very different from how you would manage it in a developed country. So this story is not just about India. When I talk to people, I say that Germany might have had the first engineering school in the world, US might have had the first medical school and the first management school. I think India has the opportunity to build the first development management school, a number one development management school to roll across. Short answer to your question, the opportunity is India.
I love that. And I'm with you 100%. That is the big one. Now, as we look forward, I want to pause and reflect and look at the rearview mirror and ask you to share two moments in your life, career, one that did not work out as you had expected and planned, became a failure, was a lesson, and another one that exceeded your own expectations and became a success beyond your imagination.
Yeah. The first one is the more difficult one, and I say that with a huge humility and recognition of my privilege that I've had a life which has been very blessed and or maybe just my positive sort of attitude. But and this might sound trivial, Nitin, but when I started ISDM, I thought I'll do this for 5 years maybe, and it'll all be sorted and done. And that's the corporate world, right? I write 5 year strategies, I deliver to that, and I move on with a big bonus or something like that. So I thought this is going to be a 5 year journey, and now we are into the 8th year, and I think we're still putting the foundational blocks. So I won't call it a failure, but it certainly was not what I had expected will happen, and that is one side of the story. The other is it's a collective failure. And I think as a middle class person, or at least an ex middle class today, maybe I'm in a slightly better socioeconomic bracket, we let our brothers, sisters, and others down. And I see that in my own family. I see that in my own communities. I see that in my own colleges. I see that in my own, district, state, and country, where I feel that, and I own this responsibility, that we made a lot of progress thanks to the public system. We went to public schools, we went to public health places, we went to public distribution. And then once we made money, we created our own bubbles. We went to private schools, we went to supermarkets, and we went to the private hospital. And we just completely ignored the fact that 90% of this country was suffering. That for me is a very big letdown. And the fact that I didn't even realize it while I was growing up. I just thought I was leading the correct life and things like that. And that for me is definitely a huge failure, if you ask me. In terms of, sorry, and the learning from that for me is just being aware and raising our children with greater awareness. In India, I say that today there is a Bharat and there is an India. And some of us privileged people live in India and think there is no caste, there is no poverty. India is a great country. We have flyovers, we have bullet trains. Not realizing that 80% of your country still is not able to afford a basic, healthy, dignified life. And I think raising the awareness is a huge thing. And that goes back to parenting, that goes back to school education, that goes back to societal values and things like that. And that's a big learning, which is that this is a whole system that needs to change. There is no magical app or tablet that you can produce that changes. So a huge learning is that social change requires thinking systemically. And that's a very different mindset because a lot of us who come from the corporate world problematize and solve the problem. It doesn't work like that. If it was so easy, we would have solved our problems long back. So that's from the failure or the negative side of coming from that side of the spectrum, if you like, with it. On the positive side is ISDM for me, right? When I started ISDM, I said that iconic world-class institutions are built by the Rockefellers or the Azim Premjis or the Ambanis. Ravi, who are you? But I started with this idea that, listen, this is a life I want to lead. This is what I want to do. If it succeeds, fantastic. If it doesn't succeed, I've led the life that I wanted to lead anyways. That was my simple theory of starting. And I gave myself a 5% chance. I'll be very honest. When I started, I gave myself a 5% chance saying, Come on, Ravi. I think you know yourself that you're trying to do something way beyond your own. But it's unreal when you think audaciously, think big for society, how much of tailwinds you will pick up. Now, whether it is a timing thing or not, and this is interesting, Nathan, because I'm a non-believer. For me, I'm too much of a rationalist. I need an explanation for everything. But the number of times the world has conspired to make things happen in the ISDM journey is unreal. And that for me is a huge message to people who might listen to this talk, which is don't underestimate what you can do. Start, move that leg, move that hand, do something. It's unreal what you can achieve. I think all of us get overwhelmed by, who am I? What can I do? The problems are too big. This country is too large. It's too complex. Really, Nitin, the biggest learning for me is put that first foot forward, and then we'll figure out the second and the third and the fourth. It's unreal how much you can achieve.
I can so relate to that. And I'm glad you're mentioning this because we have to dream big because we are solving bigger problems. And once you take that first step, once you show that leadership, you're right, people will follow along, people will see that vision and they'll help you get there. It doesn't remove the challenges we'll face, but it does help to have that collective effort and backing. So it takes you closer to that next step. Now, can you get it done in 5 years? That's a whole different story.
Correct, correct, correct. It may not. And that's the other thing about working in the social sector, right? You can't be too deterministic. I
Right.
will change this in 5 years' time. No, it's too complex. But I'm doing the right thing for change to happen. That's what you should do. And then change might happen in 5 years, change may not happen in 5 years. And not everything is in your control. So you have to do your bit.
So true. Ravi, before we move on to the next section, I'd love for you to tell us, other than ISDM, what do you do for fun?
Yeah, I call it fun. It may not, a lot of audience may think it's not fun. The thing that I really enjoy is time with youngsters. And thanks to ISDM, I meet a lot of youngsters. And it's therapeutic when you're near 60 and you have friends who are closer to 25. It's unreal. So that's my absolute fun. So spending time with students, spending time with alums, and so on and so forth. And the other small personal story is I'd gone off to work in a village in Kerala for a year. And during that time, there are 7 kids from that village who like become my kids. And that joy of being like a parent, mentor, friend, guide to those 7 kids and to see them having flourished and now being able to move their own families and their village a long distance socioeconomically is a huge privilege and joy. Yeah, youngsters like them, youngsters like the Alan. And then at this age, a lot of people want you to be a mentor. Oh, I love it because I learn so much from them.
So true. I was just having a discussion with a teacher, and I said, both in the philanthropic world where you write a check, you receive more than you give, and also as a teacher, when you're teaching, you're learning more than you're actually teaching. Yeah, I agree 100% with you.
This thing about getting more than you give is so true, Nitin. People, a lot of my batchmates say, you're an IIT, IIM guy, you gave it all up and you're doing social work. And I tell them, I don't think you realize it. I'm getting way, way more than I'm giving. So don't think of me as some altruistic, special person or anything. I'm leading a very selfish life. I'm doing things I really enjoy.
I so agree with that. Now, on to my favorite part of the show, the one line life lessons. Ravi, I would love for you to share your life lessons with us.
Sure. So the first thing is to make a lot of friends and travel. Because I think we all need to be more aware of the world we live in. And things like that help you to become aware. And I have a favorite line which I use in my college, which I'd heard long back somewhere else. So it's not like my original line or anything, is that you will learn the most from people who are least like you. And that mantra is so powerful. So I'm all the time going to the most different person and saying hi or traveling to some distant place where I do. So that's one big life lesson, which is you will learn the most from people who are least like you and thereby try and spend that time. If you're aware, you'll lead a far more meaningful, rich life. That certainly would be one.
Another one is this thing that we talked a little earlier. If you are unhappy with some reality or status quo, do something about it. I think too many of us are stuck in these living room conversations and not doing anything about it. And not because there is no intention, it's because there's a feeling of being overwhelmed. It's beyond me, it's for the politician, it's for the government, it's for the whatever. I really think that we should just set forth in whatever change. So do something if you have a problem, if you feel bad, if you feel it's unfair. I think doing something, a bias for action would be a big thing. That's the second one. The third one for me is this thing I talked about, meritocracy. Don't fool yourself to think that you're meritocratic. There is no meritocracy in this world. That's the biggest nonsense we have created. I think everybody is meritocratic. The opportunities are different, the life experiences are different, and thereby you manifest different things. If you recognize that and realize that child who's begging at your car window could have been a philosopher, could have been an artist, could have been a musician, could have been an engineer, is something that will completely change the way you look at life and respect other people. So I think seeing the agency in everyone around you, and it's very selfish, by the way, because it makes you a superhuman, because you will benefit from all those, that humility of accepting and learning from everybody else. The fourth one for me, and this is a very Indian thing, this treating youngsters without respect for their abilities. It's so systemic, I can't even begin to tell you. The biggest marginalized community in our country is not the conventional labels you'll think of. I think is the youth. The youth do not have a platform. The youth are permanently kept under by the previous generation. They're told not to ask questions. They're not told not to question things. They're told whatever. And they're always told you're irresponsible, you don't care, etc. And I think that's a very unfortunate reality of the world. The other thing I would say is that we shouldn't think of work very selfishly and think about it purely from our lifetimes. We should lead a life that is good in your lifetime. The results of your life could be in this lifetime and may not be in this lifetime. The reason I say that is that some types of change will not happen even in your lifetime. Changing attitude towards caste, it may take longer than your life. It may not also. It may change rapidly, and that's just a complex combination of things happening. But does that mean you don't work on that and you only work on COVID because COVID needs to be fixed in the next 2 years? I think you have a problem there. So then what happens? You tend not to work on things you can't change in your lifetime. And that's not good because that continues into an intergenerational problem. That would be another lesson for me. The next one is about education. Unfortunately, all of us look at education as with an instrumentality as a lever to a good life versus the way to become a good adult. And I think education is not about just economic progress that you achieve in your life or some status in your life. It's about how do you become a good adult in a meaningful society, right? That idea has to be understood. Otherwise, you're going to study geography, maths, and whatever very rote fashion or in a very formulaic way versus building critical thinking, building problem solving abilities, building the ability to synthesize things and all that. So that I think is an important thing for I've certainly benefited and learned from. I think respecting other species is another big one. That's, you wouldn't see any of this climate change and all the other bad things that are happening if you just had that simple idea that this planet is not only for human beings but for everybody else. And by the way, if the everybody else is not there, you human being are anyway going to go extinct, right? And I think that respect for whether it's an animal, whether it's a plant, whether it's a water body, whether it is a mountain, I think that's another idea that I think is, gosh, I sound like a God man talking about so many life lessons. I don't know, did you get enough or I can think of more?
Ravi, thank you so much. Really appreciate you sharing your journey and story and your life lessons, but more importantly, for doing what you do. You were an ace corporate guy, and you said, enough of this. I'm going to go make a change, uplift the community, and make a difference. And you have, and I know you will continue to here in the few years to come. Thank you once again for being you, for doing what you do, and really appreciate you making the time to come and spend this journey with us.
Thank you, Nitin. Thank you so much for even considering me for your amazing show. I've listened to your talks before, and I was thinking before I came, oh my God, I'm going to be in this group. So thank you for that. But more than that, thank you for possibly spreading this story, because that's what is the more important. It's not about you or me. It's about a better world we want. And these are just ways of getting to that better world.